Excellent. Welcome to TADSummit Innovators. I'm really excited to have Alex from YouMail. Some people will recognize what Alex is describing from one of the other TADSummit Innovators we've interviewed in the past, Voxist. And what was really nice is Alex knows of Voxist, even though it's a far smaller company. But anyway, Alex, please introduce yourself and YouMail, please.
Sure. So I'm Alex Quilici. I'm the CEO of YouMail. YouMail has a mission, which is to try to protect consumers and let them communicate safely over the legacy telephone network. We just do two things. One is we have an app that consumers use to protect themselves, and we take all the data we collect from that app and use it to help carriers stop originating all sorts of junk that winds up being on the network.
Excellent. Short and sweet. Thank you so much. So, Johnny, I know you are so excited that we have Alex here. So go for it.
Listen, first of all, I want to thank you, Alex, for coming on. And, we've had a lot of great podcasts. We've had Bird that flew in. We've had some really exciting stuff. Just a lot of stuff that happened recently with MEF. And I call us, the SMS CPaaS world. But, for me and for our fight here, on spamming grandma and our kids of our country, I view you and Mr. Rudolph, Mike Rudolph, who I watch his testimony on to the senators and congressmen religiously, because it's the greatest piece of work I've seen anywhere. And you guys are like superheroes. And I just want to thank you on behalf of everybody and the people that our 19,000 subscribers, which is a lot of guys on Wall Street and SMS people and people around the world. Actually, a lot of the people that you send cease and desist to or information go are listening right now. And I just want to thank you for what you guys have done. And, obviously we want to learn more about how you view the world, because that's important. But I view you guys as the $1 trillion company. And I'll explain my perspective on that to you, because that might make you fall off your chair. But I think, this is a big day for me, a special day to have the most important company on behalf of the consumers for how many years now? I mean, really. So a lot of people don't know, and our ecosystem, really how important you guys are. So
well, I appreciate that. And I just want to say it's not just Mike and I. YouMail has a team of almost somewhere between 60 and 70 people who are working on this. And every one of those team members is contributing. I know Mike and I are the public faces, but the guys who build stuff and run the services and make our customers happy, that they're really super critical part of this whole endeavor. But thank you.
Spoken like a true superhero. At the end of the day, and look, again, the testimony that Mike gets into, and how trusted he's become. I mean, you can see the senators, you can see the congresspeople, you see where everybody else is full of it. And just the fact that you guys have put up against the monopolies, the pressures. I mean, the operators got to want to kill you guys. I'm surprised they haven't tried to buy you guys just to put you away. Because, we've unraveled a little bit of what they're doing on the SMS side. On the robocall side, we haven't really touched that. And there's a reason for it, because it's very complex, and it's a regulated industry, and it's already a multi-billion-dollar $4.99 on everybody's phone bill across the country situation. So you're talking about a whole ecosystem that sits around there. Whereas messaging, I think we can nip in the bud with the sham setup of the campaign registry, what we've uncovered there. And how, and this is not an argument or a statement or even an opinion, the mobile operators have designed it not to work. And we've proven that. We've put our information out. So, look, I think there's some hope, but we'd like to, at one point, be able to come back to you and get on that one. I know there's a lot of stuff going on in the industry, rumblings, with the FTC and the FCC looking to regulate messaging. Not sure if it's rumor, but when it comes from like 20, 30 different people and a lot of good sources, there's definitely a big concern, because, kids are they're not calling. They're just text messages, and 78, billion spam texts, which I'm sure you know better than us on the numbers, and what's going on with these phishing attacks and clicking on the wrong links. So it's just the industry here needs to understand how brave you guys have been, just with all the pressures from the companies around. I mean, I have friends that are in the ecosystem with the messenger monopolies. They can't talk. Like they can't even like come near us or look at us or talk to us. It's just amazing how much of it basically an organized crime ring where people are afraid of the operators. I mean, we had this guy from Cameo on talking about, we had being threatened like, hey, it'd be a shame if you lost that phone number type of situation. So, if you kind of can talk a little bit about messaging, because I think on the robocall side and what you guys have done, and I know messaging is the new phenomenon really with business texting, and now you attempted to try to say they're regulating something, but lying to the FCC, the campaign registry. What are you seeing as far as trends there? Where do you see that going? Just out of curiosity.
Well, so I guess what would be helpful, excuse me, would be to actually talk just a little bit about some of the lessons learned on voice, because they help us understand messaging, right? If you look at how voice has gone, there's been progress from where it was to where it is now in terms of the amount of robocalls and the types of robocalls and how much fraud and unlawful calling there is, right? And so that's good news. The bad news is that it's become extremely complicated to make phone calls, right? Like you're going to get labeled as spam likely. You've got to go pay 3 cents a call for branded calling if you want to try to get through more. You've got all these lawyers beating up on you if you try to do anything that's just slightly off. And so I think there's lessons there, right? What was really effective in driving calls down was finding the biggest sources of bad calls and trying to put a bullet in them. So that was done by companies like ours who have content of what the calls were doing, using that content through things like the Traceback Group or now Stir Shaken to find the source, and having the carriers that were putting that stuff on the network or letting it traverse shut it down. That's been the most effective thing. And you've seen scam calls go from 2 to 2.5 billion a month down to 300 million to 500 million a month, 80% reduction. So
on scam calls, but not actual robocalls.
Well, but when you look at robocalls, there's two types. There's some that are actually very legitimate. My doctor's automated dialer telling me to come in for an appointment, right? So there's about 2 billion of those legitimate calls that have been kind of going at a very steady rate, which means that the fraud and junk calls went from almost 4 billion down to 2 billion overall, which is fraud and telemarketing. So we've seen fraud come down a lot. Telemarketing's a little tougher, but it's gone down a little bit now too. So there's progress. It's not perfect. But the lesson for me is you need a way to monitor what's going on and very quickly get to bad behavior. That's the most effective thing here. Everything else, the branded calling, the labeling, a lot of that stuff just makes the problem worse. Right? So
it's a racket. It's just a big racket. The whole branding calling is a racket. Like, what is scam likely? What does that mean? Could be a scam. Could be my doctor. Could be my cousin from New Jersey who changed his number. I mean, what does scam likely mean? What does it even mean?
My home phone, right? If my home phone was scam likely for a while. So it's like, I'm not scamming anybody. So, but I think the lesson is that the more you try to do ahead of a call getting on the network doesn't necessarily help. What really helps is watch what goes on and have a really fast feedback loop to stop things at the source. And if you can make it so difficult to get going with these campaigns, that makes a massive difference. So that's where I start. So let's look at messaging. Right? Messaging is nice because you have the content of the text messages as they're going. You generally know where they're coming from. So you need the same monitoring mechanism to be put in place post hoc. Here's a bunch of stuff that came. Here's where it came from. And then some reasonable rules if a carrier keeps putting tons of junk on, just like what happens in the phone call side of the network, they don't get to play anymore. I think you start with something really simple like that and see where you get. And text messaging you can filter. You can see bad text in general. Now, pig butchering and some of that stuff is harder.
But that's kind of like a gray area. You're talking about people reading people's messages, and where is that data? So I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying it's a little gray. But I can tell you one other thing, because I know about your many patents, right? And I know you have a certain patent that's very similar to another patent that another gentleman we've had on our show. It's almost identical, revolving identity and being able to know who the sender is and who identity. So I know you have that in your portfolio. I've read it and I've seen it. So I understand. I don't want to get into that now because I don't want to start getting into patents and which patent is this one, that one. Because for me, that doesn't matter. For me, it's about solve the problem, right? So identity, I believe, on the messaging side is something that you guys have in your back pocket, and other people are also. There's multiple people that have kind of copy pasted, whether it's yours or somebody else's first. I've seen 5 iterations of it.
Well, you're bringing up a good point. So there's 3 things that matter here, right? So what matters is who is the person doing the action? That's important. Can we know who they are? Do they have permission to do what it is they're doing? Do they have consent to do whatever behavior they're doing? And is what they're doing inherently legal or illegal, right? There are things that make things just illegal, right? Like you make a phone call and violate the TSR because you don't have a callback number. That's just on its face illegal. So you can do things with calls, voicemails, et cetera. You can do things with text messages to pull out clearly illegal stuff. This thing has a URL and the URL is known to have done illegal traffic. It's gone. That text message doesn't get through. So there's a path, right? And so I think the way to start attacking this is each of those pieces. So you register for a phone number. That's fine. Don't charge for it. People put their info. That's available. You monitor what's going on. If you see that was bad, then you've got to do more investigation on who that customer is and find ways to not allow them in the future. Content. I think we need a national content registry for content permission. And what I mean by that is when you make a call, when you send a text, if it's an automated way, you need to have said where you got permission to address that phone number. You put the URL of the form, you put, it's a dealer contract, whatever it is, there's a national database that keeps track of it. And if anybody's making any text message that doesn't have an entry in that database, it doesn't get through. That's a reasonable thing to do in an automated fashion. You've said, I've got permission for this, especially at scale. And then the third is the monitoring to look at what's the behavior. This has a bad URL in the text message. This is a brand impersonation because it's coming from a phone number not owned by this brand. The brand registered for phone numbers. It's a different phone number, mentions that brand. It can't get through. I think there's a path to do all this that doesn't require kind of pre-registering what you're doing. It's instead saying who you are and then providing evidence of permission when you go take an action.
I'm going to take you one step. I'm going to take you one step further on that. My opinion, and this is because, as you know, there are certain groups that can legally text you and call you as many times as you want. I don't want to mention them because I'll get blocked on YouTube again. So we don't want to say where it is. Who can spam, who can call you and text you as many times as they want. Why? Why is that happening, right? There's a loophole there. From my perspective, I should be able, my mother had dementia, right? Now it's full-blown Alzheimer's. We couldn't block people calling on a phone. We only wanted my sisters, our doctor, our cousins, our aunts. We had a list of 20 numbers. We couldn't do that, right? So we couldn't say, I don't want you calling. I don't want you coming in my house. I don't want you knocking on my door. Why aren't the public? Why isn't there, and I know you have this in your bag, why isn't there a gambit for call it self-sovereign identity? Call it, I want to know who's coming in my house, who can contact me. You used to have private phone numbers when we were kids. You couldn't get somebody's number. Hey, can you get his number? Can you get his number? Right? Why is that off the table? I know it's the P word, political. I'll say it. I don't know if we're going to get banned that. It's a political situation that's going on there that I think is going to come out very soon, Alex. Now, will anything happen of it? No, but do you agree? Like, you have a daughter, right? She's going to college. She's 18 or whatever she is. Do you want just anybody contacting her or texting her? Shouldn't you or her be able to control who contacts her?
So
where's the privacy? Where is the privacy?
I think the solution here is apps, believe it or not, because apps can be configured as your agent to decide who gets through. So I don't care if a call that's, say, a political solicitation is legal or not. I'm just going to block those, right? It's only the contacts get through, or only this kind of stuff gets through.
But you can't.
You as a consumer, you can really configure quite a bit, right? In fact, our app allows you to just send, I mean, Apple, you send all the calls to voicemail, which means they hit another platform, and that platform makes decisions about what happens with the call.
But you don't think the mobile operators should be responsible? Why is a company like YouMail the hero for the mobile operators' consumers? What I'm saying is,
yeah, no, so look, I'd rather the operators not do it, because I'd rather have consumers be able to pick an app, maybe our app, maybe another app, whatever app does the job for them, that they can configure and control. If it's embedded all the way,
the average person is not going to want to configure anything. I'm 57 years old. I don't even want to download an app. I don't want to take the test. There's still a demographic of people that are above, say, 30, 35, that don't have time. They're driving a truck. They're working. They got 3 kids. What time we got to eat dinner? Who's going to school? How am I going to pay my bills? Now they got to sit down for 5 hours and try to configure. I understand there's a demographic for you, and it's a higher end intellect that is more technology savvy.
You're getting complicated on the notion of configuring. The simple setting for, I think Alan mentioned it, we were talking earlier, it's, I don't want anybody who's not a contact getting through. They can go leave a voicemail, maybe, whatever. Okay, first setting is nobody gets through who's not a contact. Everybody else goes to voicemail that's transcribed, and then you can filter out all sorts of stuff. And then you can see what gets through and say, I don't want any more calls like this. I mean, AI is the point where it's like, oh, this person rejected a political call. Let's get rid of all the political calls. You can configure over time to get a really customized experience.
But the mobile operators are charging $4.99 a month. Why wouldn't they just give you the $4.99 a month and let you do it?
I can't get into
this is all about economics. This is about 3 publicly traded companies that a company like you had to stand up. You had to go through the history. You had to go from, voicemails to your days in AOL and the stuff that you created there. And you guys had to champion a fight when it was their responsibility. From my standpoint, you could argue all day with me, but I think I got 9 out of 10 people on my side on that one. Let me go one step further. We can replace human kidneys with pigs' kidneys. We can't stop spam? Really?
So think about where the operators came from, though, right? Like, there's lots of criticisms, but their job for 160 years was to get calls through. The notion of blocking a call, they weren't even allowed to block calls, right? Until what, 8 to 10 years ago. And now it's a requirement to somehow block calls. I have some sympathy that that's a very difficult task because we try to do it, right? And so I think that's a part where it's hard to get mad at.
Pull your identity product out. Pull your identity product out of the hopper. You got it in your back pocket.
I guess when you say our identity product, are you referring to?
I don't want to get into it now, but you kind of know what I mean, and it's a different conversation. Look, I'd like to have you on weekly. I'd like to call it the YouMail show at the end of the day, because look, I mean it. I'm dead serious, because you guys are important. And, I want to go back to one thing, and I want the industry to know, and I want Wall Street to know. First of all, Alex, explain to the people what TCPA is.
So the Telephone Consumer Protection Act was basically a law to try to stop telemarketers at the time from spamming people's phones with calls without permission. That was the gist of TCPA. And what they did is they made it really easy to pull together class action lawsuits of groups of people who experience the same potentially unlawful behavior.
And how big is that industry? How big is it?
It's a huge industry in terms of lawyers both doing TCPA lawsuits when they believe there's evidence of bad behavior, and lawyers have to defend these companies who may or may not have gotten into a TCPA trap. Some are actually violating the law. It's
the richest plaintiff bar in the country, the TCPA bar, right? I mean, plaintiff lawyers, they go to parties fighting over how many jets they have.
Anytime you have a $1,500 fine for bad behavior and you've made millions of calls, it's
stop right there. Fine. A $1,500 fine. Where's all that information coming from? YouMail. So what I'm saying, and I'm talking to you guys on Wall Street, what I'm saying is, like the czar puts out that list of the top 10 plaintiff lawyers every year, right? That people fight to get on. Why wouldn't you just grab 10? I grab 10 of them and say, guys, look, let's all pool our money together, buy their database, and it's over. Right? Why not use it against the companies and let them police themselves? That can be done. Like you have an intrinsic value. So I'm going to put my finance businessman hat on, right? If I'm looking to go acquire something, I tried to acquire the campaign registry, right? Very easily to raise money, unique asset, monopoly, didn't know nothing. Took me 48 hours, right? Based on the numbers, the margins, bang, done. If I were to raise money, if I were to go down to Wall Street and I was to go to some hedge funds, I'd say, hey guys, we're going to buy this asset. I wouldn't even go to them. I would go to litigation financiers. I'd go to plaintiff bars. I would get a consortium. I could just buy your database and just stew till I'm done. And every one of these companies out there, the old spammers, they wouldn't know what to do because a lot of these plaintiff lawyers, like I said, I know a plaintiff lawyer, a firm that literally went and spent $300,000 trying to find the information you have to sue a company just because they thought they were guilty. Right? Now think about that. This is an experience I had recently. A company that they were listening to ourselves and saying, well, I don't want to name the big CPaaS company. Like, well, they're definitely spamming. I'm like, yeah, everybody knows they're spamming. And they went out and they invested money. And I'm like, why don't you just call YouMail?
So a couple things, right? So we're well aware of the value of our data to potentially support going after, large scale class actions. And so a lot of people.
But not for you. It's for the lawyers that are going to put the money up and spend that money. You're not a law firm.
Why don't you go do that? So there's two reasons. So one is really personal. I got sued personally for TCPA violations that weren't. And that was because YouMail at one point, and we still do, had a feature called an auto reply. Someone calls you, you could configure YouMail to send a text to the caller saying, hey, can you email me instead or go to my website, whatever. We got 4 or maybe it was 5, I can't remember anymore, class action lawsuits naming me personally and suing us for everything we had, right? Because TCPA looks through the executives of a company. Yeah. And so that was a really tough situation. It cost a ton of money to defend ourselves. Ultimately, the FCC did their declaratory judgment saying, no, of course, this is not a TCPA violation 2.5 years later. And that made me realize this is an extremely dangerous law if you didn't violate it and somehow someone's going to make through some sort of path claim you did, right?
Okay, so you got sued for 2.5 years. You're Alex, right? I don't know what your plans are in the future. And first of all, I don't even want to talk about the T-Mobile Sub-Zero fines because technically they could put anybody they want out of business overnight. Now, I don't know if they pulled back on it. Have you looked at what T-Mobile issued on the $4,000 per text?
I have seen that there's been an economic penalty for any carrier that produces a text that's deemed spam.
It can go down to a small business. It could be a pizzeria. You should really look at that a little bit more carefully. Although I think they scaled back. I know a lot of companies. A couple of the companies that are part of our community literally got out of messaging because of that. Literally.
So that's the really important point here about all of this stuff, about the branded calling issues, about spam likely, about these fines, about all this stuff. It's killing the legacy phone call and the legacy phone text message. I have a physician, right, who used to send texts to remind people about appointments and used to call people. It's all email now. He refuses to use the phone network. I mean, if you call him,
well, you know why? Well, he's penalized because of this campaign registry. So he doesn't know. He wants to comply. So he's got to go through this cumbersome, who you know, who you don't know. What are you saying here? What are you saying there? He's got to go through this whole rigmarole. And the dentist, your doctor, the plumbers that people want to hear from, right, have now been penalized. Why? Because it was designed not to work. It was designed only to monetize messaging. Although if you listen to the czar, he'll tell you this. It's like some kind of Batman shit going on, and they're going to triangulate everything on a dark night. Which I actually had to go back and watch the movie. But don't get me started on that. But yeah, this has been penalized. It's got to be cleaned up. And I know Mike Rudolph is testifying and talking to everybody. I've been trying to get him for a long time. He's ducking me like crazy. But I have a lot of people that know him. And I have a lot of people that know he's the most trusted guy to those people he's testifying against. right? Because he just ate them alive. He came in there just like bang, Batman, and he just ate everybody alive. And so, look, I don't want to get deeper on this because I really want you to come back because I think you're really important. I think your company's really important to my team's mission, to our team's mission with Alan Quayle at TADSummit. So let me explain to you a little bit about Alan Quayle and TADSummit. Alan's been running one of the biggest hackathons in telecom for many, many years. Probably the largest outside of Twilio. We've got, like I said, close to 19,000 subscribers. He has hackathons with, tens of thousands of hackers. And now we've started this innovative podcast. And he had mentioned a company, Voxit. I'd love to see. They just got a $4 million grant, Alan. And they're looking to come to the USA. And they're doing some new stuff. And they got to deal with Cisco. So that may be a company that you may want to reach back out to. Because Carell over there is just lit it up. So I could publicly say he's got to deal with Cisco. I could publicly say he's got a $4 million grant in France. But there's no money to raise money in France. There's no equity markets in France and Europe and VCs. I mean, you can count the number of unicorns on one hand. I mean, it's funny. Since talks about we're the second largest unicorn in Sweden. Yes, because nobody gives anybody money to do anything over there, right? The money's here, right? It gets deployed from over here. But we have a lot of innovators. We have a lot of companies that listen, and a lot of them are concerned. And most people, your dentist, your doctor, the plumbers, they're getting hurt here. So I think we're on the cusp of something happening with messaging. I do believe it. But I have a difference of opinion based on identity, which I'm just diving into and learning. And we get a lot of different products and companies coming to us in different flavors of identity. Man, I'd love to get your guys' take on that. And because I think that's eventually identity is going to come into play.
So my take on identity is it's a really tough problem to solve. It's a relatively easy problem to solve in terms of large public entities that make lots of calls. It's easy to understand that this is a particular bank or whatever and register their phone numbers and make sure it's all good. That's not where the problem lies. The problem lies with the 20 million or 50 million or 100 million free phone numbers that are out there, or numbers that people are barely paying for. And you can't verify all the identities on all of those folks. And that's where a lot of the fraud and scams and other things in messaging are, right? It's the person gets 100 numbers and does 100 pig butchering scams at once to 20 numbers each. And, it's starting to have a big impact. And so I don't think identity solves that. I also don't think economics solve that. I think that charging $1 for a free for a month for a number so they can't be free, it doesn't matter either. Because if you're calling 1,000 or sending 1,000 texts, it's an incremental charge.
Well, and then you start talking about the SIM box.
I'm talking about the SIM box. I'm also talking about just in general the notion of, hey, we'll put a fee on everything and that'll change the economics. I don't think that works. So I think identity is helpful in some ways. I don't think it solves the bigger problem. If it's like a pyramid, it solves at the top of the pyramid, but a lot of our problems are moving to the base.
Well, identity is going to be coming forth for a lot more than just phone calls. It's going to be people want to know who somebody is, whether it be your driver's license, whether it be anything. I mean, you can't open up a bank account without identity, but there's a lot of other things you could do without a driver's license. So I think identity, and that's a different conversation. But I mean, look, everybody uses a phone number for identity. Why can't your phone number be an identity? Why can't another phone number be associated to that phone number and be your identity? And then we didn't even get into the AI and what's going on there and the deep fakes and how it transcends into big tech. I mean, this is really a broad conversation. And I think so far, you've let the public understand, especially the messaging world out there that doesn't understand what TCPA really is and how dangerous it is, and your painful experience with ambulance chasers. So you had ambulance chasers that said, hey, YouMail's got money. Let's go wreck their life, right? And that's just an underlying message that I'm giving to some people out there that want to poke TCPA lawyers. Not good.
So I think the really interesting thing is that TCPA can be stretched. Any law can be stretched, and people stretch it to figure out the breaking point. I think the really interesting thing that we've learned, though, is if you think there's a TCPA problem, if you think there's an issue with something, it's reasonable to provide tools to try to stop it at the start before it goes crazy. So look, notice that this content's going out there and it's calling after 9 at night and violating a state's TCPA. That's factual. Like, you have facts that you can use to stop these campaigns rather than letting them go crazy and then suing later, hoping to make a fortune. And so
But TCPA is important. It's a gazillion-dollar industry. It's not going away. Not if the carriers say it. And can you imagine taking that away from those lawyers? It's not happening. And my point to you is, I say we go out and get a bunch of people and buy your company for $1 trillion. Not a trillion, but there's $1 trillion database there. If you have $1 trillion, there's got to be a way. So I'm sorry to come at you that way because my business hat goes on. And I'm like, you know what? And some of the companies that are listening to us right now, they should be on your doorstep. You guys are the most valuable unknown company and heroes at the same time. So I want to thank you. And I'm going to let Alan ask a couple of questions because he's going to yell at me later.
I'm only going to be very boring. You know, when you started YouMail, what was the focus? Was it just doing a value add around voicemail, or was the whole robocalling, spam there from the beginning?
So it's really interesting because I wasn't a founder of YouMail. I came in as an angel investor and then ended up helping the company and gradually, becoming the CEO and raising money and stuff. But the original idea I thought was a good one, which was essentially have over-the-top voicemail distributed by carriers.
Yeah.
The problem is the carriers didn't want to distribute it, and they didn't want to put it internally, and there was a whole bunch of stuff, and it's all understandable now in hindsight. But we ended up morphing, right? So we found we had a lot of consumers using our apps. So we said, okay, let's go and do consumer over-the-top voicemail without the carriers. And we had a feature in that product, which was you could play an out-of-service greeting, this number's out of service, to a particular number. People use that. The original design of that feature was stalkers and people you want to deal with. It was all 1-800 numbers at the time. It was all the same group of numbers. And so we kind of concluded and decided, hey, users are using us to play an out-of-service message to telemarketers. And that's how we wound up in the blocking call space, because we thought, well, we could do that automatically. We can have a layer to try to stop the phone from ringing when it's from these numbers. And that ended up being the most valuable thing, was the insight that, look, we're about helping everybody communicate safely.
Exactly.
We've got a safer voicemail, we've got safer calling. Let's make that what YouMail is all about.
Interesting. I didn't realize that, because I've seen so many presentations from YouMail and it always focuses on the sort of the data source, or, basically we got this app and here's a pricing model. But, that out of service measure, that's so sweet. That is like powerful and simple,
And it turns out that's what people, they say every product has a core thing that people like. That's what people liked about our product.
Gotcha.
And that's what kind of exposed us to, hey, there's a much bigger market we can play in. And the really interesting thing about the whole stuff we've been doing with carriers and enterprises is that was a bit of an accident too. People came to us and said, hey, do you have an API so we can see if numbers are spam? So we built that API and people were using it. And then we started seeing all these weird uses of it and decided, no, it's better for us to create a product that just takes in a bunch of phone numbers and watches what they do.
Exactly.
And that's what we ended up doing, which is what we're selling to the carriers, because that's what enables them to see when they have bad behavior.
Gotcha.
Well, it's not just the carriers, it's the agencies, it's 51 attorney generals, FTC, FCC. I mean, it's endless.
We have a lot of valuable data because of our view that's carrier agnostic, right? Our users are on every carrier. We're just seeing what's happening to that really nice size statistical.
I say we take YouMail public.
If you can figure out a way, I'm all ears.
Yeah, well, especially with the $1 trillion valuation.
It's not hard. It's really not hard to figure out at the end of the day. So some people are listening now. And we'll see what happens, but there's definitely there's just the value is just insane, and just the gratitude, because look, before you know it, and I'm going to say this on air, there's going to be tens of millions of screaming Swifties and robo-moms coming, because we've just started, and you should take a look at my team, and it's not me, it's the guys above me, and they're not playing, and they got a problem with the carrier's conduct, and they got a problem with the level of fraud and scams. And as you know, with AI now, it's game changing.
That
Right.
is it's a real problem. And I've had people talk to me and go, well, but it's really hard to do a voice clone and get the data for a voice clone. And we showed that if you just call someone and hear their voicemail greeting, record it, you can build a really high quality voice clone in a few minutes.
Yeah.
And so that
You're going to have people that won't answer the phone because they don't want to get cloned. What's going to happen is you're going to start seeing some. It's funny, but it's really sad. You're going to have people. You're going to have some cases that come out, and you're going to see some fantastical stuff happen, and people are going to be in fear. I mean, look, there was a study done on the mental illness created just around robocalls and spam texts.
Yeah.
So there's a level of people. There's people still running around with masks. So there's a level of mental illness in our country already. And then you compound that with the fear of the phone, the fear of the phone call, the fear of the recording, the fear of the text message. And now you've got even a bigger problem. I mean, I'm here in New York. You got guys that should be getting help punching women in the face on the street, Alex. It's a different ballgame. We're living in a world that, we could talk at a high level, but it's really intense. And mental illness really plays a role in really what is going on in our country. And it's a sad.
What you just said that's really interesting is a lot of times the problems with people not answering the phone were originally just annoyance.
Yes.
Right? I don't want to deal with it and talk to a spammer, right? I don't want to waste my time. But it has moved to fear. Like with some major financial institutions, there's more imposter calls out there and more imposter texts than the real calls and the real text. Like Amazon doesn't call anybody, and they do a good job. They're trying to help solve the problem, but there's way more. There's tons of Amazon calls out there where Apple hardly calls anybody except in response to a support call. There's tons of Apple brand calls out there. That's really made people scared. What do I do with this thing? So
the average person doesn't know, though. The average person doesn't know, with the amount of news out there, and it's not about intellect, it's about awareness. And you can't educate everybody, but there has to be a way to solve it.
I think the fear is spreading through social networks and other places.
Yes.
On my local next door, once a week, someone is scammed. And everybody who sees next door hears about that scam. Like, I got a Zelle and it wasn't really Zelle, or I got a Venmo, or I got whatever. It was a bank. So people post those scams, and then everybody goes, "Oh God, I can't use Facebook Marketplace anymore. I can't get this text message."
But there's still billions of people there. There's a small percentage of people that don't use it, and then there's more victims. So for all the people that are conscious, there's 10 new victims coming on board. So I think you're right. Awareness is good, but it's just not reality. I mean, look at that John Oliver special on pig butchering, on some of the people, or the guy in Hong Kong that wired out $30 million or whatever it may be. There's really elaborate scams, and anybody can fall for it. So I think it's a big problem here. The problem I have, and you don't have to comment on this, is we've unraveled that the mobile operators have set up the campaign registry with the intent to do one thing: make billions and billions of dollars a year off A to P messages and take all the checks and balances off of even protecting the consumers and your doctor and your dentist and everybody else. It's a sham. And they did it without cover of the CTIA. They did it without cover of anybody overseeing it. So as much as they may not like you guys at YouMail, I'm hoping they hate us more when the antitrust lawyers come. But that being said,
I don't want to comment on the intent.
Don't comment. Don't comment.
What I would comment on is I don't think it's necessary to have the campaign registry. So we may differ here.
It's not needed.
I think the notion of pre-registering what text messages you're going to send is a little crazy.
Yes.
Like,
well, the reason why they set it up, it's a scam. It's been an RFP since 2013. Then CTIA and iConnect have won it. It's a scam. It was just a way to get a half a penny and a penny per text on a person-to-person message, which they deem as an A to P message. So it became a product of the Twilios, the CPaaS world, the pandemic, and everything going onto the app. You're right. It's not needed, but it's there. And now, you'll see now, I just heard Cineverse is going to, start blocking unregistered messages. But it doesn't matter. They still rotate numbers and spam away. So I think, Alex, look, we've been talking for a long time here. And I'll be honest with you, I just hope you come back. And can you get me Rudolph's autograph?
Sure. And actually, he's probably the busiest guy in the world, right? So I don't even get to see him that much other than Zoom.
I have friends that know him. They're like, nah, we can't get him on the phone. He won't talk, So unless you get elected to public office or they're you, he's not talking.
I think Mike likes to be very thoughtful and speak in certain public forums on topics that he's got a lot of data. He's got a lot of
let him know that we watch the stuff. We've circulated his hearings. We circulate it in our world. And in our world, it's kind of like Mickey Mantle. Like, wow, did you see this guy? He just came in there and they didn't want to talk to anybody else. They wanted to stab everybody else but him, actually.
Well, it's great. I mean, Mike is extremely smart, has great data, and knows how to articulate what's going on. So,
Yeah.
And so we're going to get an opportunity to talk about some of your success at AOL and some of the stuff that you've done in the history. But I'm going to hound you. I'm going to hunt you. And I want to talk to you offline regarding just what I think Wall Street, I think the cat's out of the bag as of now. I think the cat's out of the bag as far as there's an intrinsic value to your company and your database and your years of protecting consumers. And when the people come, they need to know that YouMail was there and you guys, they all want to kill you guys. and you know what? I know. Because now they want to kill me, and I'm not YouMail. I'm nothing. I'm just a guy screaming that figures some stuff out with a brilliant team with Alan Quayle. But you guys are the real deal. You guys are on the front line, and I just want to thank you on behalf of grandmas, moms, kids, and everybody else out there because you've made a big difference. So forget about how many robocalls there are or how many scams there are. How many have been stopped because of you and your group? That's all I care about.
Yeah.
You've stopped X amount of crimes from happening to people, and people go through their everyday life. And not many companies can wake up in the morning and say, you know what? We just stopped 100,000 people from their lives being destroyed. I have a friend of mine who lost his identity. I talked to him the other day, bond trader. He's destroyed 3 years. He still can't get his life back in order. Can't even file returns, can't do anything. So on behalf of all the people listening in our community, we want to thank you, and we want you back.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you. I love having the chance to get the message out that we're just all about getting everybody to communicate more safely. It's a really simple mission that's really hard to do.
Absolutely.
Superheroes.
Absolutely. With that, then, again, Alex, thank you so much for your time.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.